In May 2026, the Central Statistics Office released figures that showed for the first time in our history, civil marriage ceremonies have overtaken Catholic weddings as the most popular choice for couples. In this cultural shift, is there a deeper question missing here? In a world where the forms of commitment are changing, what happens to the soul of a marriage? Today we're going to be joined by Tony Shanahan and Suzanne Cantwell from Accord. For over 60 years, Accord has played a really vital role in supporting relationships in Ireland, often really well doing the job of navigating the intersection of faith and modern life. From things like their marriage preparation courses to their professional counselling services, Accord's mission is grounded in a deep Catholic ethos, a belief that where marriage and family are strong, so too is society. Thanks both of you for being with us today. I wanted to just start with that piece of data from the CSO. Now, I know there's not much in it, but more couples now civilly getting married than in the Catholic Church. What do you make of that?
Well, the data that comes out of the CSO is fascinating stuff, and we will look at it each year. And it came out only last week or so, the previous week, and it showed that all marriages are down. The 2% drop in all marriages. There's a drop in civil marriages, there's a drop in spiritualist marriages, there's a drop in Catholic marriages, but the proportion of marriages which are Catholic is a strong percentage overall. It's about 37% of first-time marriages. The biggest growth category has been in what's called other religions, and that's a really interesting piece of data because it's actually 63 lines of religions of all kinds, some of which are Christian denominations that we'd all be familiar with, Baptists or Orthodox Christians and things like that. But there's also lots of New Age religions in there as well, like Druids or pagans. And the one I found most interesting was called the Rites of the Temple of Plants. I hadn't heard of that one before. So a lot of them are actually variations of spiritualism. And I think that, if you look at the marriage ceremonies that have some element of faith, over 60% of them have a faith component, be it the New Age religions or the more traditional religions, as the case may be. So I think faith is still a very important element in that mix that goes into choosing to make a lifetime commitment to one's partner.
Is it a good thing that maybe within that data that those who really want to get married in the church are choosing to, rather than it just being a kind of cultural part of the day? That it's I remember doing the paperwork, with the parish priest before we got married, thinking, how do people fill this in when they don't buy into it? Because it's really serious stuff. And you were asked, questions about how you're going to raise your children and your faith together. And yeah, it kind of broke my heart a little bit that, are people taking this box and they don't really mean it? So is it better that you get just maybe a smaller number of those who actually really want to have a Catholic marriage?
Well, I think the fundamental thing is that people are in love with each other, and that's the basis of their commitment. And in one of the letters of St. John, it says that those who live in love abide in God and God abides in them. So I think people are a lot closer to God and the divine than they may realize. I think that, we've come through a period of time when the church had lots of rules and regulations, and maybe people still associated with rules and regulations, as opposed to, I want to get married in church, I want to make that commitment. It's a divine commitment, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. Those are awesome commitments. And I mean that awesome in the true sense of the word, awe-filled. Where better to do it than in front of the altar of God in a church, which is a dedicated environment, a sacred space, as opposed to a commercial space. And I think that some people don't quite realize that you can get married in a church with a wedding ceremony that isn't a nuptial mass. So some people may think that it doesn't really feel right getting married in church because I'm not a regular mass goer, or our guests won't be regular mass goers, they'll be uncomfortable. But actually, you can have a marriage ceremony just like you might have in a hotel, except it's in a sacred space. We did do some research in the summer last year, and we found that 60% of Catholics do want to get married in church. We also found that 40% of the Catholics who hadn't got married in church would have liked to have had a priest officiate at their ceremony if that were available to them, but it isn't in Ireland at the moment. It is in some dioceses in other jurisdictions. But less than 50% are aware that you can have a marriage ceremony without a nuptial mass, and only less than a quarter of people are aware that if you've been already married civilly, you can actually still get married in church in what's called a convalidation ceremony, provided you meet the usual criteria. You haven't been married before, with a marriage that hasn't been annulled and things like that.
One of the things, obviously, if you are having a Catholic mass, and is that you do the marriage preparation course, which I know probably sometimes the attitude is, oh, this is a box to tick. However, the feedback a court has gotten from people, I know my own marriage preparation course still stands to me. And I've had that conversation with many friends who mightn't attend mass as regularly as me, where they say, there's so many things that we learned on that course. I'm really glad I did it. At the time, I was a bit, oh, whatever, have to do it. Is that the feedback that you get, Suzanne, or what are you kind of hearing from people who do the courses?
Yeah, I think in general in Accord we hear people give very positive feedback about the marriage preparation program. Sometimes you might hear people saying, oh, we have to do this because we're getting married in the church. And often you will find people who feel like that before they do the program have really changed their attitude towards it when they finish. They find it very helpful. They appreciate taking some time out before the wedding to, I suppose, look at the foundations of the relationship. A lot of the focus can be on the wedding day and planning that event, but not so much on all of the
What
years
comes
that come
next?
after. Yeah.
That's something that's always fascinated me, the amount of time, money, energy, effort that goes into one day without kind of going, okay, but what about our life together?
Yeah.
And marriage is not easy. It's wonderful, but the ups and downs and challenges that can be thrown at us, to me, it seems like a no-brainer to be putting the time into preparing for it. Nobody knows it all.
Yeah. And nobody knows what life is going to throw at them, I suppose, and how you're going to cope. And I suppose, laying the foundations, doing the program, having an awareness of, communication in your relationship, your conflict style, and the influence of your family of origin, having conversations around intimacy and everything that, the couple dynamic involves, I suppose. So yeah, it's a really positive day for people. The feedback is generally really great, and people appreciate having that, I suppose,
That time to connect as well. And
exactly.
the topics you talked about, like you say, family of origin, things like that. How I raised influenced our relationship, and how do we want to continue with our new family unit and all that sort of stuff. That's just one example that people mightn't have actually thought about or talked about until you're put in that situation where you're in a room and you go, oh, this is actually quite important. Do you find that a lot, where it's kind of a bit of an eye-opening moment for people?
I think it can be, yeah. I mean, it depends on what stage people's relationship is at. Some people are in a relationship a long time before they decide to get married. They'll have, crossed a number of bridges already. But I think what the program does is give people facilitated time and space to really look at, their relationship and plan for the future. So, yeah, the feedback is generally very, very positive.
Bring back just a little bit to the fact that the number of people choosing to get married overall is declining. Do you think a lot of that, Tony, is there's a huge amount of pressure on young couples? We're in the middle of a housing crisis here in Ireland, economic pressures, all these sorts of things, that it's just kind of kicked down the road. And it's sad in a way that almost the importance of marriage maybe has been forgotten.
Yes, I think that, economic pressures are certainly delaying marriages and definitely delaying people having their first child and so on. It's an unfortunate consequence of the society we live in nowadays.
How do we bridge that gap to say, don't put it on the long finger, you don't have to have the 200 people, you don't, I find it really interesting when I talk to, you meet couples that are married 40, 50 years. That's something many of us aspire to, hope for, pray for. And you say, they reflect on their early days. And so many will say, oh, we didn't have a bean. We were sitting on cardboard boxes. We didn't have furniture for the first, few years. Whereas now this generation feels everything, I have to have everything in place, everything perfect. There's been such a shift in that regard. Do we need to bring it back to kind of more simple living and loving?
Well, I think, it's a personal choice. Nowadays, if you were to choose to get married in church quite simply and have a wedding breakfast or something, that would be a quite radical thing. And yet it was the way it was done in my parents' time. And when I got married, that was 44 years ago now, it was much simpler than it is now. I think our wedding reception cost us €700. We weren't entirely sure who was going to pay for it. Was it me or my father-in-law? But he paid for it in the end. So I think it's down to personal choice. I mean, certainly the biological clock works against us, both males and females. But at the same time, you have to be ready for this commitment. You have to be ready for the children, because one of the great American psychologist, psychotherapist, John Gottman, he has a book and it's called And Baby Makes Three. And that changes the dynamic all over again. And then the fourth one changes the dynamic as well. So people have to be ready for that.
One of the things, actually, as you mentioned, John Gottman, I remember doing a marriage enrichment course a few years ago, and John Gottman's teachings were brought in, the things, I think he calls them the four horsemen of the apocalypse, in terms of how you treat each other, stonewalling, nitpicking on each other, and the things that can really damage a marriage. And I remember thinking, wow, I'm so blessed to be here, putting the time into our marriage. You know, when you have a car, if you have to service it every 15,000 kilometers, you know, we get that, looking at things. But sometimes when it comes to our marriages, we forget. We're minding everybody else, you know, and running a house and work and kids and all those pressures. That's something that's a really important part of Accord's work, is also, it's not just the marriage prep work, it's the accompanying couples through the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I suppose Accord is there to support couples right throughout the journey of their relationship. And we have a schools program for primary schools. We have the marriage preparation program for couples who are getting married. And then we have the relationship counselling service to support couples who are finding challenges in their relationship or have hit a rough spot and need some support. So, and just to go back, you know, you mentioned just about marriage and, you know, people getting married. And I would say what we see in Accord all the time is, regardless of, you know, when people choose to get married or whether they get married or not, what hasn't changed for people, I think, is that desire for connection and that desire for healthy relationships. That has remained the same. And I think that's what we see, you know, consistently. People want to have happy, healthy relationships and need the support to do that, because it doesn't just happen. I think all relationships need support at different stages. And couples can learn a huge amount going through the process, you know, the counselling process or the marriage preparation process with Accord, which I think is a real positive.
I'm sure you've seen lovely stories over the years, be it through the marriage prep or counselling, where, and I'm pretty sure, probably yourself included, Tony, anyone who's been married for a long period of time, I'm only a newbie here, coming up to 13 years, but my own parents, for example, married 50 odd years, they'll all say we hit many bumps in the road.
That's right.
You know, and here's how we navigated it. Do you think there's more of an openness now? I mean, we're living in the social media world where there's advice coming from everywhere, but is there more of an openness to say, yeah, it's there's nothing to be ashamed of when your marriage needs work or support?
No, absolutely. I mean, one of our experienced facilitators starts off his presentation usually with, I've been married 5 times in my life. And there's a shock reaction. And he says, to the same woman.
Yeah.
Because the marriage has gone through different
seasons.
phases.
Yeah.
And, you know, in the world of counselling, we talk about attachment. And so sometimes when a relationship hits a rocky patch, there's a disattachment, or the attachment isn't as strong as it was previously there. But when it attaches again, it's kind of magical. It kind of goes full circle. You go through a period of romance, and then perhaps disappointment and disillusionment, then reconciliation, and then romance blossoms all over again. And part of the work that we do in the couples counselling is explaining to people that this is normal, as you say, and that when you hit a rocky patch, you've worked through it in the past, you can work through it again. Now, it depends on the issues being discussed, of course. Some are much more difficult than others. But a lot of people nowadays, especially young people, are coming to couple counselling looking for tools, as they call it, so they can manage their relationship better. They want to have effective communication, and they want to have effective attachment and intimacy, as you say, and they want to be able to resolve conflict. And I think that, you know, nowadays it's kind of more important than ever, because younger people spend so much of their time texting each other or on devices of one kind or another.
Not communicating eye to eye.
No, exactly. You know? And, you know, it's a very brutal way to communicate, as I say to my own children. If you're texting all the time, you're missing so much of the richness of what the person is trying to say or what they really mean. And you pick up something completely different when you're looking at somebody in the eyes, you say, or seeing the body language, or you can ask them directly, you know, what do you mean by that? Because we use the same language all the time, but often we have different meanings attached to what we're saying.
Yeah, or can be misinterpreted and things like that. in terms of just the future and the work that's going to be happening within Accord, what does the next few years look like?
Well, I think very exciting. One of the reasons very exciting is because Suzanne has joined us. You know, traditionally, Accord is 62, 64 years old, something like that now. We've never had a marketing manager before. And I suppose maybe in some respects we thought we didn't need a marketing manager for the kind of thing that we do. But I think that, you know, in many respects, Accord is a great
Such a brilliant resource and support, but a lot of people might know about all the work that's being
exactly.
done.
It's a hidden thing. It's a secretive kind of thing. Not deliberately secretive. It's just less known. And so, you know, with the word of social media and things like that, and somebody who comes with the relevant expertise, we're expecting to get out there and make ourselves more known to people. You mentioned social media. I would say one of the core values of Accord is authenticity. You know, we're not there for the sake of it. We're not there to drive clicks. We're not there for market share and things like that. We're there to provide an authentic service which values the relationships that people have with each other.
Isn't that something that's really important to highlight, that Accord's purpose is to support relationships and marriage? It's not a corporation seeking profit. That's literally the goal. Is we want to be here to support you. I think that's quite a beautiful thing, that's the goal.
It is. And, you know, word of what we do does kind of leak out a little bit. Every now and then we come across people who say, oh yeah, I went to your pre-marriage course. I wasn't getting married in church, but I heard it was a great course. I said, did you find it useful? Extremely useful.
That's an important message as well, because I've had this situation with friends who mightn't be, you know, churchgoers or whatever, and I'd say, look, I still recommend you do a marriage course, because it's the majority of it is obviously it's on that kind of gospel value of loving and supporting family, but it's practical stuff that's going to help you wherever you're getting married. Like, is that important too? And from the church's perspective, it's like, however we can support people who are entering on this walk of life together is a good thing.
Yes, I think one of the testaments to the depth of value of what Accord does in the pre-marriage course is a comment I read where somebody said, we've been living together for 7 years. We didn't think there was anything more to talk about, and yet we found so much to talk about. And often people will say, I learned so much about my partner by doing the marriage preparation course, even though they thought they had already covered everything off. And the other thing about it is, you know, it's done in a fun way. It's not lecturing. It's largely participative. A lot of the work is done in kind of self-reflection and, you know, talking to your partner, and some of it is group work as well. Anytime I've attended a pre-marriage course to see how it's going, there's a lot of laughter. There's a lot of happy faces. There's a very relaxed kind of environment.
What are you most excited about, Suzanne, in terms of it's a new enough role for you, about the work that Accord is doing?
I think the work Accord does is great work all throughout the country. We have, is it 40 centres we have around the country? And I'm really excited about getting the word out there and, you know, raising the profile of the organisation and letting people know that this service is available. All of our counsellors are professionally trained counsellors and therapists. All of our facilitators are professionally trained. So it's a really excellent, high quality professional service that really helps people. And I'm really excited about getting that message out there.
Well, it's been lovely to chat with you both today, Tony and Suzanne. Thanks so much for being with us. Thanks for all the great work that you're doing to support marriage and family.
Thanks, Wendy.
Good to be here.